out where they were or where they were headed. So instead of cutting through the path, he chose to stay on the exposed slope. The plan was simple: survive just one cold night. Then it'd be a warm over silence. Because sometime after dark, something happened. There was no diary entry that describes it, no photograph that captures it, and no one survived to explain it. Every single thing we know about the night of February 1st, 1959 is feedback to somebody, but you just can't be bothered to make the appointment, or you just forget a lot like me. Well, we're not doing that this year, okay? We are going to ZocDoc. Now, I know most of you know, but for those of you who don't, ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors, so you can find someone you actually like to go to. We're talking over 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering 200-plus specialties, including primary care, dermatology, dentistry, eye care, you name it. And you can search by specialty or symptom, read thousands of verified patient reviews, and see real-time availability and book instantly. No phone tag, no waiting. Those doctor's appointments, and go to ZocDoc.com/CCCM to find and instantly book the doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/CCCM. Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel, and let's get back to it. So here's what the evidence tells us. 9 people ate dinner in their tent around 6 or 7 in the evening on the slope of Dead Mountain, and the weather outside was absolutely savage. Winds blowing at hurricane force, likely to 30 meters per second, and temperatures plunging to minus 40 degrees Celsius. A full snowstorm raging across the ridge. The snow was packed away in its case and never actually assembled. And the evening shortly, detailed the newspaper that they made at the beginning of the trip, was near the entrance of the tent. And everything about the day had seemed normal. Then something changed, because someone cut the tent open from the inside. But not just one cut. First, small horizontal slits near the roof. These were described later as viewing slits, as though someone was trying to see what was happening outside without losing shelter. Then came the larger cuts. One long vertical splash, and 2 horizontal tears ripped wide enough for a person to climb through. So it looked like, first, they looked, and then they ran. 9 people left the tent and walked into a blizzard wearing almost nothing, as every pair of boots stayed behind. Jackets, raincoats, backpacks, and cut food sat on plates, which was either a meal half prepared or just depleted. All of it was abandoned, and they left with what they were sleeping in, with 2 exceptions, though. Zacharyov and the ReTool were later found better dressed than everybody else, with some footwear. So the first theory is that they may have been outside the tent when whatever happened began, and were already partially clothed, because 8 or 9 sets of footprints led downhill. A search party radiogram would later describe, quote, "We managed to identify footprints of 8 or 9 people starting from the tent and going about 1 kilometer down the slope, and then they were lost. One person was in boots, the other were only in socks and barefoot," unquote. The footprints were preserved in a way that seems almost impossible, because the compressed snow had hardened into pedestals that held their shape while the wind swirled away everything around. It's an uneventful descent that they just essentially walked downhill, which is just wild to think about. 9 people slashed open their own shelter in the middle of the night, abandoned every piece of survival gear they owned, and stepped barefoot into minus 40-degree winds. And they walk. They don't run. They walk. Whoever drove them out of that tent was terrifying enough to make them leave everything behind, but not terrifying enough to make them run. But also, why cut the tent? The entrance was right there. So that in and of itself is very odd. But one possible explanation was that the cuts were made on the side of the tent opposite where the wind was primarily hitting, where the hikers slept. So something was blocking the entrance, like snow, debris, or the threat of something outside of it. and cutting through the walls closest to their heads was the fastest way out. But just why not grab your boots and coats, or just anything for that matter? Because in minus 40-degree weather, leaving without insulation is a death sentence, essentially, and they all knew that. They were all extremely smart individuals. So whatever happened gave them no time, or at least made time irrelevant. And after roughly 500 meters, the footprints disappeared beneath fresh snow. So nothing more from that point on in terms of footprints. But one flashlight was found partway down the slope, 450 meters from their tent. Switched on, but its battery died. And another flashlight sat on top of the tent itself, resting on a thin layer of snow, completely uncovered, like someone had set it there after the storm had already begun. The broken piece of steel lay 20 meters from the tent as well, and the next evidence would be found a kilometer and a half away at the tree line. But what happened in that gap between the tent and the forest is completely unknown, because there was no signs of struggle at the campsite besides them cutting through to the tent, just their own prints, walking calmly downhill into the dark. So this is the central point of the story. Whatever happened on that slope, only 9 people witnessed it, and none of them survived to say a word. So before leaving for the expedition, the outlaw had made a simple promise. When the group made it back to this high, he would wire the UPI Sports Club to confirm their safe return, and that telegram was due by February 12th at the latest. But February 12th came and went with no word. Yet nobody panicked just yet. It wasn't unusual for groups like this to show up a few days late. And the outlaw had even mentioned to you before setting out that the trip could easily run along. But by February 15th, people started asking questions. And Galina Radisteva from the UPI Revenue Commission and Igor Krivonshenko, Yuri's younger brother, pushed the University Trade Union Committee to contact this side directly. And they wanted to know one thing: had the group come back? Because they hadn't heard anything. And Biscay's response was short: they hadn't returned, and no telegram had arrived. And things should have escalated there, but they didn't. Lev Gordo, the head of the UPI Sports Club, told the parents of Lyuda and Sasha that he had received a telegram from the outlaw about a delay. But that was a lie. And Gordo figured the group would show up on its own and decided to manage the families rather than sound an alarm, which is insane. So on February 17th, Rima Kulatova, Sasha's sister, went looking for Gordo, but his office was empty. It was the families who finally forced him. They complained directly to the local head of the Communist Party even, and bad publicity was the one thing Soviet officials couldn't tolerate. And pressure from above moved faster than concern from below. So on February 20th, relatives demanded a rescue operation, and the first search parties were mobilized the next day. So the scale of effort was enormous. And Colonel Georgy Orshikov from the UPI military department was put in charge. And volunteer teams of students and faculty spread across the region. And groups under Boris Slavsko and lawyers Axelrod and Olad Sredin. And the Blinov and Sobern expeditions, dispatched on their own tracks and familiar with the landscape, joined without hesitation. And Vladislav Perlin's team, already operating nearby, rejoined the search too. 80 guards from the Igdala prison system were joined, and also 7 officers from the NVD, the main law enforcement in Russia, and Nazi hunters who have spent their lives navigating this